recording. Okay, so we'll be debating under the motion. This house would break out NVIDIA. With no further ado, to start the debate, please welcome PM. Hey here.
Hi, am I audible?
Audible and visible.
Okay, thank you so much. Oh, by the way, if you want to POI, just raise your hand. I will probably accept by the 4th or 5th minute mark. Okay. So what does breaking up NVIDIA look like on practicalities? So it looks like four things. Number one, we will disintegrate the vertical integrated model of supply chain. That means the manufacturer division will have their own company. Packaging, infrastructures, they will be separated into multiple different companies, perhaps under different brands and also under different structures. Second of all, we will break it apart into smaller companies that should be sold to other owning companies or be created as a standalone corporation. That means NVIDIA will own only minority shares in those like broken up companies, so they cannot control it or dictate whatever strategies like the pricings, the partnerships, or the type of supplies and also type of product they launch. So that means the control, like sure, NVIDIA perhaps will still have some, remaining, product knowledge there, and like the way things are being constructed, the qualities and services will still reflect how NVIDIA used to supply this or used to create this, but they will not have that majority control over share and also about whatever strategies that these companies decided to do. That means we're going to use antitrust law to break these things up apart and like through legal means. But lastly, the primary aim of this is to basically reduce NVIDIA's market share of the graphic processing units and also AI processing infrastructures. And I'm going to dissect my argument into two parts. Number one, I'm going to basically characterize how the accumulated power of NVIDIA has looked like and why breaking up means we're going to create better solutions. But second of all, I'm going to do trade-offs, right? What if we have less research? What if we have, what if that means we have smaller companies competing against each other? That means there's less innovation because you don't have a centralized capital on like one specific institution that can do it all. Okay, let's talk about how cumulative power of NVIDIA has looked like. It looks like multiple things. Number one, 90% of market share means you supply GPU for all segments of devices and laptops. You go for gaming, office, home computers, mobile devices, PCs. So you touch even the niches market from entry level price to upper range luxury segment. This is how powerful and also how big the profits and also revenues that this particular company has amassed. But second of all, this looks like an uncontrollable power to dictate pricing, qualities, and API structure. This manifests into several things. Number one, that means they can maximize price and profit margins that harm consumer with zero alternative and also zero consequences because there's no other competitor that like consumers can choose from. Like even if there's exists, like sure they'll say, oh, there's still the 10% of the market shares of other companies, for example. Like their quality and distribution scope is not as big as NVIDIA. They're probably just available in like very, very segmented countries or like in Europe. We're talking about consumers that are primarily all across the world, like in Asia, in Asia Pacific, Southeast Asia, which probably will not be touched by the distribution scope of these smaller competitors, right? And second of all, they're not used by widely available brands that you can find in like most common retail stores like ASUS, HP, or Dell, for example. That's why laptop prices are currently skyrocketing, right? Because now the processors are like very, very expensive due to only having a single, very dominant player in the world. And this is also added with the fact that now one of the key players of the GPU that used to compete NVIDIA before they reached this 90% market share just opted out of this industry and decided to pivot somewhere else. It was a manufacturing company that was backed by Samsung. I forget the name. So that means you have very, very minimum option the moment NVIDIA decides to like abuse their power and in terms of pricing. But that also means, there will be no consequence if they drop like the surface quality or like the the type of what is it not ingredients but like the manufacturing qualities of these products that they supply. But fall. Currently, they're partnering with OpenAI to develop AI data center complex. That means they have purposely allocated less resource to put into typical GPU manufacturing. This has caused scarcity of supply in terms of GPU and also and also other processing units, create driving prices even higher, and it happens to all layers of in all segments of laptop, especially when I've told you even the lowest range or the most affordable price, the most affordable types of laptops are also supplied by NVIDIA, right? Lastly, it looks like API structure and data exchange mechanism being controlled by them. That means it can harm consumer rights and privacy protection to many, because they can have a say in like maximizing analytic sample. They can control how data are extracted, processed, and also like sent to NVIDIA, either masked or not. So this makes them having more capacity to further amass profits from customer profiling. This is how significant and how predatory NVIDIA has been with this amassed power of 90% market share. Breaking up means simple things. You reduce the power for them to do this by limiting the amassed capital and access to infrastructure that enables this harm. You reduce the capacity to access that much profile of consumers, or you also allow smaller competitors to actually have a chance to grab bigger market share. When you have less market share, you allow competitions to exist and lower down the prices. You allow consumers to have better options in case Nvidia effed up and like decided to not, to make good quality CPU anymore. Now there's a real consequences of not providing the best service in the name of profit. So that means there will be better and also safer option as well for consumer data, because you have better API providers in the market now. Yes, sure, POI.
Breaking up means major restructuring. What about the employees that get laid off under your side of the house?
Okay, major restructuring doesn't automatically means layoff, right? Number one, they can just change the employment contract to the new whoever like owning companies that will later come in and like owns the company. Because I've told you in the model, right, how it's going to look like. It's not like we're going to eradicate these companies at all. Like they're just going to change ownership or like change brand. So I don't think the layoffs is going to be that big. But second of all, there's still market they have to tap into, and just because they will just enter it into different names doesn't mean that they will automatically go bankrupt and then we will lay off lots of people automatically, right? I think that even if there will be layoffs, like Nvidia is so rich, they can provide a very generous severance package. So they will be fine. Lastly, talking about trade-off, there will be less research and innovation, sure, but this is not a virtue or an absolute benefit, because research and development in Nvidia is done to maximize AI's ability to replace humans through their open AI partnership. And this is the most the place where their R&D budget comes in, right? So it's not a research and innovation to support. So if we don't have the research, we don't have this innovation, we're going to be fine. We support breaking up Nvidia.
Thank you, PM, for that speech. To open the case from opposition, please welcome LO. Here.
All right, am I audible and visible?
Yes, audible and visible.
Wait, setting timer. Okay, wait, give me a second to read my notes. Only a second, wait. All right, let's start my speech in 3, 2, and 1. Okay, so 3 points of setup and side oppositions, right? Firstly, I think NVIDIA, based on the info slide themselves, hold the largest power in case of in case of hardware, softwares, and also AI features and so on and so forth. I think by this information, this also means that NVIDIA is in the possession of niche features. I'll elaborate more. Why are the niche features in that is held by NVIDIA is the largest issue when you break up, right? Because on their side of the house, I don't get a clear pictorialization what will happen after you break. Yeah, what will happen after you break up NVIDIA, right? Other than the cases about competitions and innovations and so on and so forth on their side, I'll also discuss on that, right? But secondly, clarification. I think that the monopoly is not that, yeah, not as huge as what a proposition is scared about. I think there are also large companies like Intel, for example, as competing with Nvidia, and also DeepSeek in China, that is also equally large to Nvidia in US, for example. Therefore, there are cases about breaking up because of because of mass profits. Towards NVIDIA is not that urgent from the start, because innovation competition already exists through the large companies in other regions, right? So I'll talk about two main cases, two main responses. Basically, my arguments will be integrated there. Firstly, on the companies. Secondly on the stakeholders, like consumers and also the workers, right? Firstly, on the companies, I think a simple frame, like, because Nvidia is a US major stockholders, that they're also not only they're influencing the economy in US, but they're somehow influencing but they're somehow influencing the technologies in other countries as well. We support competition, but because Nvidia's is one of the two big two fail companies, that their influence to the other countries is also very significant. Therefore the breaking up is more risky than the benefit the propositions has offered to you, right? Look, it looks like how people in developing countries as well, people in most of the areas that is influenced by Nvidia are also in panic when Nvidia is in difficulties, right? Since this is a too big to fail companies that holds a lot of percentage and features on technologies. So basically, these are a few likelihoods on how then the breaking up looks like, right? Firstly, you have to deal with a lot of supply chains afterward, right? I think with breaking up this tech companies that is already that the ecosystem is already interconnected with each others, like the feature, for example, the software, for example, and so on and so forth. Breaking up also means another trouble for customers. For example, you buy everything.
LO, can you speak a bit closer to the mic? I'm sorry. You're at 4 minutes now, but your audio is a bit too distant.
Okay, when is my check? Am I audible now?
Now you're audible again. Yeah.
Okay, I'll just speak closer. When is my last sentence still?
So you start getting audio closer. Your audio start getting softer when the worker is at panic when NVIDIA is having technicalities.
Okay. It's 4 minutes, right?
Yes.
Okay. Continue in 3, 2, and 1. This is how it looks like when the too big to fail tech companies breaking up, right? I think you're also I think by breaking up, it also means you're breaking up the interconnected ecosystem inside the tech companies means that this is also a trouble for customers, for example, for the markets, for example, because you have to buy everything, because you have to buy every features, every features and so on and so forth from different companies. For example, you have to do another research for the tech companies, for example, which it also takes a lot of work to do, right? Therefore, I question how then the likelihood of the innovation can happen when when the first thing that you have to do is that to adapt and all is that to adapt and also 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 adapting to the market in and of itself, which I need a proof from proposition side of the house, right? Secondly, I think with so many supply chain where different companies will oversee each sectors, there can be spike of pricing because a lot of entities will be involved here. Companies and corporations have the possibilities to shut down due to the inabilities to compete in the markets for example, right? Therefore, in terms of prices, that they're arguing about marking up the prices, the spiking the prices in features in this case also possible in their side of the house. Yeah, also possible in their side of the house. Anyways, so yeah. Before I move on, PI.
If
Okay.
you say that Intel is a competitor, can you mention how much market share does it currently have against NVIDIA?
Okay. Actually, don't know how that works. But even if then, I think the other countries like China that have the urge to compete with US for example is also prevalent. Therefore, I think that competition is already there. So yeah. And lastly though about the breaking up process, I think if it is fragmented, it means that you have a different companies in each areas. For example, or for each products, for example, there also can be a risk of sectors that are certain small companies in their side of the house run out of supply. There can be no safety from their side of the on their side of the house by the other companies because it's not their responsibility anymore, right? Looking like how NVIDIA panic is prevalent, comparison on our side of the house, if it is integrated, technology issues can be handled with a huge company with huge capacity, right? Competition on their side does not mean innovation or better product. It's only on intense price competition, reducing the price which one is more cheaper, for example. This is likely because on technological products there's no much niche features and so on and so forth. I think this also influence the investors because investors is really reliant on market profitability. On their side of the house is much harder.
Thank you, Elle, for that speech. To continue the case from Gov, please welcome DPM. Here.
Hello, hello. Am I audible?
Yes, audible and visible.
Okay, 1 second. Toilet ya. Paper is here. Aman ya. No cheating kok. Don't worry. 1 second. Second, just setting up the arah of the each. Alright. POI via chat or the raise hand feature, I'll take one probably in the 5th minute. Probably want to take one during the second flash though. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The first thing that I'll do in my speech is I'll deal with opposition's low blow about layoffs and the technicalities of restructurization. Not only that this is number one, dismissive to Sekar's entire contextualization and mechanization about restructuring bids setting up more companies, but you have to note that government isn't a stupid actor on our side of the house, right? Most likely we're going to set up a lot of ad hoc teams to be able to handle the kinds of process that would actually happen to begin with. This means a few things. Number one, note that given the fact that the companies will absorb more jobs because these people's skills are needed in the context of status quo because AI and technology is important, right? Especially since this 90% market, so there will still be a place in this market share to begin with. We agree that to an extent there may be a delay in function, but these are very small delays, right? Probably like only slower GPU, some bugs, but the comparative on top will probably be better. But second, let's talk and flip their case, right? Exactly on top of the house, there will be more jobs, right? Because there's not only going to be one huge company that creates job in its subholdings, but a bunch of different companies that will also enter the market, given the fact that they see they're not fighting only against NVIDIA and its big capital. So you can just scrap away that part of the speech. I'll talk about two things in my speech. Number one, I'll talk about competition, why it's important. Second, why this minimizes the backlash of any possible too big to fail engagements. Sekar, first class competition. Sekar has beautifully contextualized how NVIDIA is holding the market, right? They even provided that they hold 90% of the market. I think that's something that OP has conceded on this half of this page. This means that the monopoly lacks competitors and that they are hard to cooperate because they have the entire vertical alignment in the side of the house, right? Because they can utilize their subholdings, they can utilize their divisions for all of their needs. Ops only response to sales was only to say that there is DeepSeek, there is Intel. Not only that, Intel is not a competitor of NVIDIA, it's a different segment, so that's a lie. But number two, DeepSeek is very small, and most people are still using ChatGPT for their daily lives and whatnot, right? Given the fact that it's collaborating with more people, and I think that Sekar was never responded to when she explained that there is only niches that can be touched by these kinds of competitors. So the domination is so high and the domination is so big that it becomes impactful. What's the conclusion of this? Opposition might say that, aha, there is still other incentives, there may be regulations that you can handle, but note that this is not going to be able to fly, given the fact that Sekar has already explained that NVIDIA created partnership with all the relevant bodies that they need. Just a parallel here, I think you can note and exemplify NVIDIA with people like, with companies like Amazon, for example, in which exactly since OP approved that their investment is so high that there will be less power to check and balance and criticize them. What is the implication of this then? The implication is very much simple. The prerequisite of you being able to control the price jackings, all of those problems that Sekar has beautifully contextualized on their speech is when they are broken down and separated into different supply chains in which you can monitor and bring up other competitors that ops into those other areas, right? Which can exist because number one, it's our fiat, so we can pass and doing that. But number two, why the regulations can get most of the smaller companies? Because the burden that OP never explained is why the 90% on the context slide is something that is so important and something that we have to keep on the context of their speech. Without them explaining it, that's not important. But then OP says that, aha, innovation will exist. We need to make sure that NVIDIA keeps on getting all of these niche features and whatnot. No, here's a reality check. Sekar has contextualized to you that NVIDIA has no incentive to innovate laptops, GPU, and RAM, and their entire analysis, their entire innovation products is only through AI, in which you're cooperating with OpenAI for ChatGPT, for example. This means that they are trying to improve their AI at the expense of importing capital into their other manufacturing things. Why do you think right now we're having a shortage of RAM? Why do you think right now laptops are very expensive, for example? This hurts the manufacturing industry and this hurts the customer on the ground. The link back to this is simple. Number one, in principle, note that this household motion. So we need to debate also on the governmental impacts, right? So we need to prioritize the consumers and people on the ground, and we need to make sure that there are more protections to consumers, especially since Sekar has beautifully contextualized on their speech about the consequences that they do have in the current status quo, given the fact that they have a lot of data that is being held, given the fact that they're holding a lot of predatory investments that's currently going to hamper the competitions. This engages to opposition's case about customers getting little problem, because yeah, you may be having having a little problem. There may be a delay on your products, but is that worse than having to pay $200 for a GPU? Is that worse than having to your data predatorily taken from you to begin with, right? This also means that op has no incentive for innovation themselves, because exactly then it's problematic given the fact that they have no one to check and balance them. That's because even worse. But I will flip this by saying that even if then the customers find it hard and they have to do a lot of research, that's a benefit, because this means there's going to be more tech literacy, given the fact that people want to learn about what kind of GPU that is good, what kind of CPU is good, and that incentivizes competition between these companies after it has been broken down. So there's going to be massive benefit on that end on my side. Any POI? 3, 2, 1. Second clash. How do you minimize the backlash of AI bubble? This is a household motion. So we have to talk about government interest. Government has interest to make sure that there are no companies that are too big to fail. And note that leader of op conceded to this, right? That's why we don't have any monopoly in health industry. We have no monopoly in banking. And that's why Sekar has contextualized this to be so important, because tech sector has evolved into a primary need for consumers, right? That's why, in principle, we need to make sure that there's no, we can minimize the harm of crash so that it won't happen like in 2008 in the financial crisis. Two, on a practical context too, it's used in a lot of sectors such as monetary banking. It's used in human resources. So AI is so interconnected that it would leave impact to sectors if left unattended. That's why in op, most likely the AI bubble burst will create hefty damages later on. It will impact all of other NVIDIA chains, as well as op agreed the other sectors that are codependent into it. What's the comparative then in proposition? We cannot say that the AI bubble will not 100% burst. It might, but at least on our side of the house, we play on the level of mitigations towards it. Number one, that's less likely that the power is decentralized, right? That means more likely the smaller companies can have cooperation partnership with other markers, and they are not going to be able to be attacked. Means that more AI products are going to be made. But secondly, it's easier to put out the fires, right? Given the fact that when AI drops, the CUDA drops, only CUDA drops, not the GPU. But number three is that government does not need to spend too much money on bailing out these companies to begin with, right? It means that to an extent, you can just subsidize and bail out the one part that you need, and the other markets and the market will keep on correcting itself, given the fact that our other players enter the market. Note that in this debate, you need to analyze from the government perspective. You need to analyze the direct impact of what happens. Opposition's inability to prove their urgency makes them unable to win this debate. Propose.
Thank you, DPN, for that speech. To continue the case from up, let's welcome DLO. Here.
Hi, pronunciation she, her. POI, please just unmute yourself. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. I too hate tech bros who will not waste a second to lecture me on crypto. I too hate the elitist little bubble that they have created in the economy. I think it's very important. I think it's very interesting to hear proposition try to drive the direction of the debate into a government interest debate, when it further goes to show that this would not be within the government interest at all. Let's take a look. NVIDIA has a 90% global. NVIDIA has 90% shares on the global market, and it is US based. US loves money. They love economy. Therefore, they would not break up the cash cow that they already have in hand, especially when that cash cow is heavily linked to another cash cow that they have, which is OpenAI. I think on government interest alone, Trump just would not want to do this. But also second, I just want to dismantle all of their things about the monopoly and all that. Kayak, okay, if on government interest, I think it's already a no-brainer that nobody would want to do this. But also secondly, if we're talking about a normal human person perspective on this, I just want to dismantle their point on the monopoly. First of all, I think they're kind of really exaggerating the power that NVIDIA really has. AMD and Intel is already there. Just because NVIDIA has 90% on the economy stocks doesn't mean that that is the one that most consumers use. Look at your laptop right now, it's probably powered by Intel. NVIDIA is mostly industrial grade anyway, which means that within the technology grade or within the technology market, there's a lot of segmentations as well, which allows for a lot of the free leeway for this kind of other companies to enter in as well. They only have this domination on a very specific niche of the technology market, and I don't think that's enough to warrant such a huge and drastic government intervention level, such as breaking up a big company like this. assuming like, and also like, NVIDIA already has like a ton of restrictions on them already, and not all monopolies are that bad anyway, by the way. NVIDIA is under a ton of global scrutiny, and NVIDIA is a company, so they do care about either what their audiences think, because otherwise they would not be able to make money. But also like, not all monopolies are bad. I don't think NVIDIA has done like anything that terrible anyway. Like, okay, first off, their first harm on pricing, I think NVIDIA has not done anything too sinful. Sure, they do classic corporation moves such as pricing things quite expensively, but also like I don't think NVIDIA would price it that high anyway, because like they are a company themselves. They know that if they price it too high, nobody will be able to buy it. Nobody will buy into the market. Yeah, they just don't put it that highly. But also secondly, on the whole like restructuring kind of thing, I kind of find it funny that they try to frame this as a low blow, but they also spend like a lot of time onto it as well. I think it's kind of a myth that restructuring means that it's just a transfer of ownership. I don't think it's that simple. Like exactly because they are now their own little companies who now have to compete against each other, it's very highly unlikely that they will want to still keep the same amount of employees that have the same techniques, that have the same skills, and that have the same trade secret. So what this means is that when they are, branching out again, some of the older employees will be washed out, and they will have to redo the technology again, because now the manufacturing process and the downstreaming process that they break up is already now distributed among these companies very scatteredly. There is no sense of order, there's no sense of hierarchy there. It's just gonna be a doggy dog world at the end of the day. But also like assuming that it is true that it's still the same people that is in charge of these little companies that will pop up again, what changes if the whole point was for you to restructure or to take down the power that NVIDIA had in the first place, and it's still the same person, just in different fonts in different companies? What's to say there wouldn't be another NVIDIA to the rise again? I think that we shouldn't punish a company for being good at the game. But also like data privacy and all that, and also on a little bit on the scarcity of the supply thing. First of all, no, it's not true that NVIDIA is totally secluding all the GPU to OpenAI exclusively. But also secondly, this just means that there's a room for the other companies like AMD and Intel to enter in and kind of fill in the market themselves. But also, exclusively on AI as well, I want to pop the AI bubble. Sincerely, I do, like personally. But like on an economic level, economically speaking, rationally speaking, this is just not a good decision. Popping the AI bubble suddenly without giving like this kind of aba will just ruin the US economy, like what the Nvidia stocks going down like last year did to the economy. Like the dollar literally lost their value. And this means that a lot of the people will be caught in the collateral, especially when you take into account how many people exactly depend on Nvidia and its power to power the whole entire economy, and like the whatevers. But yeah, I think it's the AI bubble, I think it's kind of a lie when they say to you that this is a mitigation. They're just making it, if they're actually even accelerating it. I'll say. But also like OpenAI, they're not just working with NVIDIA anyway, but like whatever. Okay. But if it is really true that they want to kind of like regulate the NVIDIA's power, then that's the counterfactual. You regulate them, you tax them instead of just breaking it up, whatever. If the concern is there is not enough redistribution of wealth, then tax them properly. But also like, yeah, I think also like another concern that they have on proposition side of the house, which is like on scarcity of supply, and no, I already addressed that, like on data privacy and all that. First of all, like these kinds of things are literally illegal, and if you distribute them into smaller little companies, it will be even harder to check, it will be even harder to balance. At least if you centralize them into NVIDIA, it will be much more easier to regulate, because that's just one company, and NVIDIA can take the blow while AMD and Intel back it up. But also like I think just scattering it into like many different companies as well will just scatter the same problem into many different companies without you kind of like resolving the root issue at hand. This is why kayak, okay, I think it's very intuitive for us to boo at monopolies and boo at corporations, but like we gotta think realistically on like how this will actually play out. At the end of the debate, who are the people that is going to be taking the blow? Are the people on the ground, the consumers who already use these interconnected features that they have on the NVIDIA will have to rehash their technology again, because all technology will grow obsolete one of these days, and then they have to upgrade, and then they have to upgrade, and they have to like buy from like a million different companies that will price you to death. And also secondly, like, like the workers as well would be the one who will be taking the blame. I don't know. Like, I'm not a stockholder. I'm not like the best technology nerd there is, but that's what I know will happen if you break up NVIDIA. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, DLO, for that speech. To continue the case from Gov, please welcome Government Whip here.
Hi, wait. I'm just rearranging my paper and writing number 1, 2, 3. Okay. Wait. Ugh. And drinking. They pronounce. Salah yung paper. Wait. Okay. Starting my speech. And if you're on the POI, you can just raise hand or chat if you speak. Sometimes it's not audible. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. We believe a sector as important as tech, GPU used in your everyday lives, AI that has been incorporated with every other sector, such as HR, such as healthcare, cannot rely on 90% on an entire company. And this is something that opposition has yet to defend. The first flag I want to raise early on is notice how opposition has never bitten the bullet and explain why it's justified for this 90%. Because their stance is not to break up, their stance is to support the existing NVIDIA COX mechanism, which means that they have to justify the 90%. None of this have been able to be justified across two speakers. It's way too late for the third op to come in this debate and explain that, because notice how all they have been explaining to you are things such as, oh, it's actually not that bad. I think it's actually not that evil, which has never justified their stance. We don't think that their bold stance of only mitigating harms is enough. Two clashes then I will justify. First, what does this impact to the tech sector? Second, to the people. The tech sector in 5 engagements. First, they tell us that NVIDIA has special intelligence and niche information that can help the tech sector be better. Exactly then, if you believe that this information is very beneficial to the people, it should not be gate capped to 1%, then they have to justify why it's okay for the, a huge company to gatekeep off this information instead of separating into proper functions as able to fine tune it. This has already been properly mechanized on Sekar's speech, never engaged by the rest of the team. Why it will be properly assigned to the broken up companies when we break this vertical supply chain, right? It's better for the API to be properly assessed by actual API specialists, AI processing that can be much better influenced. So if you believe that this niche information is much better, we're able to fine tune it and become much more better if a specific sector company is in charge of that specific sector. On the other hand, opposition then defends gatekeeping important information. Second engagement, right? We cannot break it up now because now they'll be too big to fail. Exactly now, if opposition then agrees with us that NVIDIA has already been too big to fail, exactly now, before this continuously happens in 2026 and forward, and you become even more reliant to even more dependent on NVIDIA, will be much more difficult and much more worse. There's also this time sensitivity issue coming on from the previous two speakers that we've already mentioned to you. So the moment opposition also agrees that this is too big to fail is the moment there will be no positive case on their side to justify why it's okay for this 90% to happen. So you cannot have your cake and eat it too. On our side, we agree there's going to be a point where there is an AI burst and so on and so forth. But at least on our side, with this broken up smaller companies, the way to mitigate the harms, the way to ensure that the technology sector does not immediately die and can bounce back quicker is when smaller companies are in charge of their each sector instead of one big NVIDIA in charge of everything. That is what exactly will be much worse on the on their side of the house. Okay, third thing, opposition thinks NVIDIA is not that evil. This is the entirety coming from DLO, which does not make sense. You cannot say a company takes up 90% and say that they are not evil. You cannot say pricing isn't actually that bad when the average laptop in Indonesia is 3 times someone's minimum wage. Means that people cannot afford this. This is a problem. But even if this is being very, very charitable, even if they're not straight up monopoly scums that opposition is trying to defend, right? Are we going to wait until they are? Are we going to gonna wait until this 90% of the shares that they're holding can be misused to that extent. We're not gonna wait. This is called mitigation of harm before a sector as important as technology ruins people's lives. You don't think we're gonna wait to that extreme extent? Mitigation of harm before the harms have already happened. Opposition then has to defend, oh, if they turn out to be evil, if NVIDIA turns out to be as bad as we think they have the potential to do so, how will any of this harm be able to be mitigated? That's their burden to explain. Fourth engagement to opposition, right? Opposition says other competitors exist. This 90% isn't that bad because there's the other 10%. By ratio in and of itself, that is never going to happen. But the question we're going to ask to you is, who? They name drop Intel without properly mechanizing how they're able to compete against NVIDIA when we've already made it clear those are two complete options. But there's any other competitor, they only make up the 10%. Means that NVIDIA, who has, by the way, in the past, historically bought other smaller competitors to keep their 90%, means that no other competitors is able to be on that rise. But they tell you there's other mechanisms, there's other policies that can curb monopoly. This cannot happen when literally a company takes up 90% that they can pay off loans or the government have to pander to them. But we believe policies are much better on our side when the government does not lose out to something as 90%. But to the extent where opposition team does agree, existing mechanisms need to be in set to control something as 90% is the moment opposition team then agrees with us that NVIDIA needs to be curbed. That's when opposition team cannot justify this 90%. So if you believe competitors are strong enough on your side, that means layoff has never been that big of an issue. It means that tech sectors are strong enough. There's tension on their end. But we've proven to you, no, 90% is too much to hold. I'll take Ireland.
Potential to be disruptive is not enough grounds for the government to step in and break up a company. Regulation and taxes still exist.
Yeah, the question is how much tax is able to justify if this tech sector bubble bursts? And 90% of people are not able to come back to their lives because their jobs are reliant on AI, because their work is reliant on the GPU sectors. So, okay, this potential, by the way, is more than just a potential. The AI tech bubble bursting is a threat that is actually happening. We don't think it's enough for us to say, oh, there might be a chance it does not happen. We think policies come from mitigation of harm. I think that's a government's responsibility that we've already upheld to begin with, right? Fifth and last engagement to this clash. They tell you the problem with breaking up such a huge companies is the problematic side effects of it, the layoffs, the small companies' failure. Yeah, we didn't really mechanize what this proper breaking up look like because we think it's a fiat to say that this breaking up as a vertical sector is likely to happen. So please do not credit DLO's unstrategic stance for questioning the fiat of a breakup when this House vote motion allows us to say the breakup is likely to happen as long as we're able to mechanize it. That's not a valid stance. Op cannot take the first clash. Last clash, I do want to defend a little bit about access to the people because the only harm towards the people opposition has tried to brought is inconvenience of the user to be able to have to research more when they're buying a new laptop, when they're buying a new device. Why is this inconvenience your biggest harm? We think it's a plus point if you're able to be more tech savvy and search every single thing before you buy such a huge event compared to status quo, where based on the questions that the debaters ask in the main group, no one knows what GPU is, right? So this important aspect to keep in mind when we think it's beyond inconvenience to allow people to have more education and research. Innovation can only happen if it's not segmented in the 90% that opposition has failed to be able to defend. On our side, we think breaking up is actually more necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Gofit, for that speech. To continue the case from up, silakan opposition whip here.
Check, more audible.
Audible and visible.
Okay, thank you. Favorite pronouns she, they. If you have any PI, just verbal. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, This debate is not about whether or not NVIDIA is a good company, but how the breaking up will affect the entire economy and the industry. Note these panels. We have proved to you why breaking it up will take away years of research, funding, and innovation that's used to operate under one large ecosystem, right? This interconnection is what makes the system work, and this could create big disruption at the end of the day. Two major reasonings why government lost this debate. Firstly, breaking it up, they say that breaking it up is equivalent to no monopoly, but this is a mismatch solution because if the problem is monopoly, then it will always happen in the same way, same industry, and the same process if another dominance happen, right? Means we should not break it up, but whether you can make better regulations for the pricing, because if they set the price too high, then people will not afford it either, right? But most of the time they are working together and an extended investment with other companies, meaning that if you break up NVIDIA and popping AI bubble suddenly without backup money generator will means that the whole US economy will fall, and if the US economy falls, then everyone will follow at the end of the day, right? But secondly, this debate should focus on which sides that could really support like the innovation, right? The whole mechanism is backlashing to these panels. Breaking it up to much smaller companies means you will take much more resources, funding, and time to create innovation because different companies have different interests and have different working model at the end of the day, right? It's dismissive to say that NVIDIA don't want to innovate because the fact that they are the global market dominance, meaning that they were able to innovate until this point till they got this, right? But there are also major demands for always updating their GPU model at the end of the day, especially like investors and other stakeholders, because it will bring more profit at the end of the day. If you want to talk about government interest, then their interest is on this to innovate because it will create more profits at the end of the day, right? But 3 points of response before I move to my clash. Firstly, on the idea of decentralization is a mitigation to bursting the bubble. We already proved that this is wrong because you agree that AI is interconnected and will lead in GPU, but other sectors exist in global dominance by other companies like Intel, but they need NVIDIA to be intact on one large ecosystem because it's effective, and breaking it up is actually bursting the bubble. But B, even if so, this is true that decentralization is the answer, then you have to take the bullet that it took much longer time to innovate, produce, and distribute with greater resources. This is exactly the harms that you talk about, right? Why is that okay under your side then? They haven't proved this until the end of the debate panels. But secondly, when they talk about the whole price gouging thing, okay, A, if a laptop is really expensive and I cannot buy it, then it's not because then it's because the whole interconnected system. Sure, the GPU is there, but it means that other companies and other sector exist is also complicit to this factor, right? Meaning that if really dominance is the problem, meaning that in other sectors does not mean that you want to break it up too, because I think that if you just want to break it up in one sector for GPU, for example, but other sectors still exist for like the hardware parts, for example, meaning that it's still a problem at the end of the day. But then how you will solve this under your side? There's no answer panels. Because if you break it up and you need more funding and resources, then it will be much more expensive at the end of the day, right? You will create products that is not interconnected to one entire ecosystem, meaning that you need more resources, you need more funding, investment to this. Explain how is that will be cheaper under your side. Okay, let's talk about the whole like government. Let's talk about the success of like breaking up the smart companies, right? Historically, breaking up always win the industry's panels. It's not a fiat in this debate. They still have to explain why the smart companies can success, why they can survive, and how can they get investment, for example. But thirdly, when talking about the whole government intervention later, we already established that there is no interest because they want money, especially like U.S. administration, right? Meaning they will tax the company if it's hindering them to get more profits because of low selling points because the products is too expensive. This is why the tax logic exists and it works, because if the US see that they set the price too high and other companies don't want to buy it, then they will force tax the companies, also taxing rich companies, meaning that you have more tax at the end of the day as the administration. Okay, moving to my clash then, on talking about which sides that actually protect the market. Firstly, talking about the economy. the market, right? The whole like investors and stakeholders thing. Here's the tipping point. Because one whole system, meaning this is where you get a whole funding, a whole funding better for innovation, producing and the processing, etc. Right? How this will happen under government then? They fail to answer how the multiple companies will have the same funding and resources because investors don't want to invest in less established, smaller companies, right? They fail to explain how they will survive under their side panels. This is our stance from the start because we don't want to disrupt the economy, hence why we cannot break it up. All the processing and the progress will be hindered. Progress that's been meant for ages, for example, all the innovation and researches that is being processed for ages, for example. The fact that investors invest so much in NVDA because it's a whole big ecosystem that really works, right? And this really works to the system. This is why the 90% is okay. Under your side, it's less likely for these companies to want to invest because it's much more less established, right? But okay, thirdly, about the workers and consumers, I think that okay, let's break the deadlock. There is no layoff, but at the end of the day, if even if people still work under your side, then how you can guarantee that they can work for the next 10 years, for example, because you haven't established whether or not they can survive at the end. But I'll take that POI before 6.
Can you right now justify NVIDIA holding 90% of a sector that's so important to people's life because your burden is not to break up NVIDIA?
Yeah, exactly. Because GPU is the whole interconnected system. That is why it's important, right? I think I recall in the first speaker speech because it works in every sectors and every divisions of the technology industry. That is why it's important to people's life. But okay, second, talking about innovation, I think that the fact that when it's centralized, it's easier to regulate and there's more transparency to each divisions. And the reason that they are leading 90% of the market is because they are one whole infrastructure, right? Meaning the system is working and it's good at the end of the day. So what is the weighing then? I think that when we talk about the magnitude of harm under government, disruption to the whole economy, especially to US branch will trickle down to other parts and other companies, right? If you means that small companies can bringing up less monopoly, but then explain how the funding will work and how the resource will work. Because if other companies from other countries, for example, will have to buy these things in separate models, then how is that more efficient and effective under your side, right? Under opposition, sure, the monopoly happens, but the fact that the regulation can happen, we can tax the company and everything. They haven't answered to the best case of this. Therefore, for all those reasons, very, very proud to oppose. Thank you.
Thank you for that speech. To close the case from up, please welcome opposition reply. Here.
All right, check. Oh, wait. Okay, if there's any technicality issues with my audio, kindly just cut me off. All right, wait, my timer. Starting my speech. Wait, let me reread my notes. A minute. All right. Yeah. Starting in 3, 2, and wait. Starting in 3, 2, and 1. I think their burden I think the burden that imposed by government side of the house by saying that we have to explain the justification of that 90% of shares does nothing to the debate, right? We never really say that monopoly is necessary. Panels, we have to realize that this motion is not supporting monopolies of NVIDIA or not. This is not a new statement, by the way, but it's just clarification. But in this scenario, NVIDIA is a company that already exists and the market is already there in the current status it's basically holding 90% of shares. Now, we're not saying, we're not gonna argue this is correct or not, anyways, but we have explained to you that because it's dominating right now, even US economy, which influences the economy in developing countries, in Indonesia as well, we are relying our economies on NVIDIA as well. If you're conducting the logic into it, I think the process of breaking up affects a lot of sectors and the aspects intersectionally, including economic aspects as well, right? I think they only rely on the cases of, oh, 90% is evil, people cannot compete, a laptop is very expensive, and so on and so forth. I think on their side of the house, the after effect, how then it actually works is also questionable at the end, right? How does that actually looks like anyways? So I think there are three ideas, mainly about clashes, right? Firstly, I don't think they also responded to the process of breaking up this NVIDIA and the effect afterwards after breaking up. Because we are already explaining to you the process step by step, that you still have to buy the features from different companies, for example, because breaking up means that the niche features that is necessary to build a certain technology, yeah, you have to buy those features in a different company. Those niche features has their own single companies and regulation. Instead, I think you have to redoing things instead, which makes it questionable, is that actually cheaper or not on their side. They do not really mechanize it either. Secondly, on the convenience, I don't think it makes sense as well, just because they explain on the pricing, right? On two ideas. Firstly, I think overseeing of each supply chain that is broken up into single companies also exists. There are also a possibility of spike of pricing because a lot of entities are involved there. Just because it's broken down does not mean it's automatically cheaper, because spiking of prices in features can also happen because of because of the market saturations of the companies when you're unable to compete. When you're unable to compete as well. The shutdown of a certain companies can also exist on their side of the house, because there are too much companies on their side anyways. Secondly, even if on the best case they get the affordable laptops, for example, in terms of pricing, this does not follow the quality eventually, because the competition they desire is only on pricing, because technology is easily copied either. You do not really focus on quality at the end. I don't really understand how then the convenience on their side of the house is really viable at the end, right? Lastly, I think on the sustainable of the economy, I think although this is a small clashes, but it's still important on two things. First, Arya Rara also explained to you, because US is kind of dependent towards NVIDIA as well in terms of economy, that once it's dropped, not only the panic on technology rises, but on two things. One, on the layoff and the economy as well, because you do not really give the sign. Second, the economy of the developing countries as well. Lastly, in terms of companies, this is where the explanation of investors come in. This matters because this also relies to sustainability of companies. Yeah.
Thank you, reply for that speech. To close government case and the debate as a whole, please welcome government reply. Here.
Am I audible?
Audible and visible.
Okay, thank you so much for the confirmations. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Opposition's case is basically don't break NVIDIA now. They problematize technicalities of layoffs, surface migration. I think a few weeks of business delays is not comparable to three things. One, laptop being priced 3 times people's minimum wage because you victimize students, entry-level workers, or just people who's trying to get by just because they cannot buy a single laptop, like they're forced to use like 2 million rupiah laptops and unable to do any productive things. These are laptops that will, get down or like get their battery sucked up after 2 weeks of usage. Second of all, it's not comparable to all rising competitors being acquisitioned by NVIDIA to grow bigger and becomes GPU price controllers. Ariel has beautifully explained to you the bigger market that NVIDIA has, the more ability that it has to swallow other competitors, to swallow and kill and do mergers, to like smaller competitors, killing other industries that are trying to thrive and compete with them. We have dozens of times tell you how the breakup will happen operationally speaking. So I don't understand why then until the latest speaker they still problematize how the breakup will be messy, how will victimize lots of people, and so on. In my first 1 minute of speech, I've explained to you that these companies will not just be gone and like lay off people. They'll just change name or like change their PT, for example. They'll still serve the same customers, produce and distribute the same thing, same quality. Just now they have different ownership. Kevin also has explained to you there will be ad hoc committees to handle the migration and let's say bug tickets in case like the migration took some time and create lots of delays in other operating devices. And there's also bidding process by other techs who want to purchase these smaller companies later on that will be supervised by government. Like again, it's a very prestigious manufacturing companies as well that like I'm pretty sure many tech companies, medium size or like even medium to large size tech companies want to acquire, right? I don't understand why then this operational stuff in which we have provided lots of likelihood is still problem to opposition's case of the house. Second thing opposition case is basically upon is that it relies on NVIDIA not being a bad company. But number one, we have explained many times that it is a bad company. But like irrespective of them having like bad intentions or whatnot, assuming like they work hard through their way up to have this 90% market share, there are still external harms that we have provided to you that needs to be mitigated. Number one, immunity to regulations that Kevin and Ariel brought. The bigger the company means you can lobby and pay settlement fees with no real reformation. That means when these companies do illegal things, the best thing you can get is like fines and also settlements, not an actual regulatory change or like better practices, for example. Second of all, it's about skyrocketing AI bubble fueled by NVIDIA's partnership with OpenAI, because now they're creating huge massive scale data centers and also AI focused GPU processors, right? And these bubbles are about to burst. So what opposition basically is trying to say is that, well, it's not that bad. I mean, like we literally explained to you how bad it's going to get. We have not only bitten the bullet, ladies and gentlemen, we chew it. We justify why these hiccups are so fine to trade us, right? That even the only thing that NVIDIA is very benevolent at, which is, let's say, research, innovation, like assume they have like foundations or whatever to do this innovative research. It's still not worth supporting because they're doing research that will kill humans' jobs, that will literally make layoffs are bigger in size in comparison to like perhaps a couple of engineers being replaced or moved into different office under our side of the house. Like in your side, like in our side, we probably just make some salary drops to a couple of engineers. In your side, you literally make lots of new graduates and also technical workers go unemployed because AI is going to replace all of them. Very proud to propose.